we have no existence. And because we don't know Allah, know God, and know ourselves, we don't know one another. Look, when I see you, I know who I'm looking at. There's not one of you in this place that I don't love. I may never have met you before, but when I see you, I know who I'm looking at. And I know that I have a duty by you. And you will never find me disrespecting any of you because I know who you are. It makes no difference how young or how old. You are from Allah. Listen now. And therefore, the essence of you is Him. I'm going to say that again. You are from Allah. Therefore, the essence of you is Him. So you are not only able to become a human being, but if you evolve properly, you can become an expression of, a manifestation of the divine characteristics of God Himself. Listen. So the Bible says, how can you love God whom you have never and hate your brother whom you see every day? Let's not just say it, let's understand it more. Listen, how can you love God whom you've never seen and hate your brother whom you see every day? Now the principal words in this is God and brother. And you have love and hate. Two opposites. But God and brother are not opposite. God and brother are similar, but you love one that you've never seen and hate the other whom you see every day. Well, now what Allah is saying to us is when you hate your brother, in whom is the essence of God, you are hating God. So the question is asked, how can you love God whom you've never seen and hate your brother in whom God is? And you see Him every day. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, every time I see a black man, I'm looking at God.
You are now tuned in to the Respect for Life radio broadcast with your host, Brother Keith Muhammad. This program is dedicated to the unity and upliftment of the Black community. Our goal is to change the world, one mind at a time.
Peace and blessings, peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome everyone once again to the Respect for Life radio broadcast. I'm your host, Brother Keith Muhammad, student in the ministry of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, Chester, representative of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Thankful and grateful once again to be able to come to you via this platform, cmpradio.net, cultivating mature positivity, the brainchild, the vision and manifestation of our good brother Jean-Pierre, CEO of this great station, doing great work in the city of Chester. I'm thankful to come to you via this platform. Thankful for everyone that's tuned in at this time. We ask that you share this broadcast, share this radio station, this Facebook page, YouTube page, whatever vehicle you may be listening through. Let everyone know not only about the Respect for Life radio broadcast, but about the program of cultivating mature positivity in the city of Chester, Delaware County, and surrounding areas, and via the web all over the world. We're thankful again for you tuning in. The Respect for Life broadcast, our program is designed, our program has a mission to help change the world one mind at a time. We want to bring about the unity, upliftment, and unity and upliftment of the Black community. We're thankful for the opportunity to share the views and ideas that really are not my own, though I do have my own opinion and express ideas myself. But what you get from the Respect for Life broadcast is via the life-giving teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad through the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, my leading teacher. So I'm thankful to be able to express whatever God blesses me to express to help benefit each and every one of you who tune in either live or after the broadcast is ended. Our mantra here at Respect for Life is whoever prescribes the diameter of your thinking controls the circumference of your activities. And today we have on our show a subject that we'll get to in a minute, but is one of the chief weapons that the enemy uses to control our activities, and that is the emotion of fear. But that's a little further in the program. But in general, we have to be very, very conscious and deliberate about what we put in our minds. We have to be very conscious and deliberate about what environment we put ourselves in. And we have to try our best to control our thinking, because our thinking, the sum total of our thoughts, determines who and what we are in life. It determines where we'll go in life. And unfortunately, too many of us are being controlled by remote control. Too many of us have been programmed and we're operating on cruise control. Somebody else has set the speed, somebody else has set the destination. And unfortunately, many of us are on a course of unfulfillment in our life and are at a loss to try to find out how to change it. But it all starts with how we think. So we want us, as I heard my leading teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, say on a tape many years ago, that he wants to make us think. If he doesn't do anything else, he wants us to begin to think, not in the manner we've been trained, but think independent and outside the box, as they say, of what this world prescribes. So brothers and sisters, thank you all again. We want to start our program, as we always do, with the Final Call news segment. This great newspaper, the Final Call, is an organ of truth. It is a publication dedicated to informing and uplifting the Black community. It is a publication that is free of corporate control, free of corporate interests. Advertisers don't pay for this paper. It is free to bring the news and information directly to the Black community without the coloring, without the skewed view and corruption of the corporate interest that you have with all the major news networks that you and I are afforded in this world. And they're really only a few. It's only a handful of, not even a handful of companies that control all the media interests and avenues that we get sources, the major news sources, via the internet or the television or cable news. Now, with the advent of the internet, you have many people now that bring information and news, which is good. But we got to make sure we get news we can use. We got to make sure we don't just get information, but we get proper, accurate information and truth that we can make right decisions from. So in the Final Call, this current edition, it comes out every Tuesday. So if you are like me and you have a digital subscription to the Final Call newspaper, you received that email today in your inbox, and you were able to open up the latest edition of the Final Call newspaper. And you'll see in that paper, on the headline of that paper, the title is, let me just pull it up here, because I don't have the printed copy with me. I will have that in my hands in the next 48 hours or so. And if you don't get the digital subscription, then you can get yours. But the headline is Black America, Surviving the Enemy's Death Plot. Black America, Surviving the Enemy's Death Plot. And in the centerfold article by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan are words and excerpts from a speech he gave this past Saturday to a national conference, a Black Power conference via, the internet. It wasn't was live, but it wasn't in person. And he shared his words and thoughts closing out that conference. But his title of his message is, Do You Know Your Enemy? And this is something very important because many of us are not even aware we have a real enemy collectively. I know you may have a brother or sister you never got along with, you deem to be your enemy somewhere in the neighborhood or across town. But in reality, the original people of the planet have an enemy. And really, in a real understanding of this whole situation that the world is in, that the poor have an enemy. And it's very important that we are conscious and aware so that we know how to fight our enemy and not fall victim to him. But in this great paper, there's an article I want to read from that is by our good brother, Dr. Wesley Muhammad, who is a scholar and researcher. He has a guest column in this week's Final Call, and it's dealing with the Pfizer vaccine, or really the Pfizer company in general. And his title of his article is Why Black People Cannot Trust the Pfizer Vaccine. And we can go ahead and add Moderna's vaccine to that as well. And I want to highlight an aspect, or a very important aspect of these two companies. As you see on the moniker coming up on the screen, Moderna and Pfizer and DARPA. These are, this is a relationship that many of us are unaware of. So I'm going to read from his article about the connection of the two, because, we can look at the science, we can look at, and they've made a Black woman, as he highlights in his article, the face, Dr. Fauci, has made our sister, Kizzmekia Corbett, Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, who they're telling you now is very involved and is a part of the creation, the maker of this vaccine that Pfizer is rolling out. So they want to put a Black face on, is what I'm saying. And if you noticed in the yesterday or the day before, I'm not sure what day it was, they had a Black woman in New York rolling up her sleeve. She was all on the news programs this morning. Good Morning America, CNN, talking to her, trying to encourage. They had a Black man they rolled out, another one, both working in the medical field, of course. And what are they saying to us? They're trying to instill confidence in the Black community in particular, because the polls, as we mentioned last week, as low as 42% or 41% of Black people were not willing to take, were only willing to take the vaccine. So that means up to 60% of us are saying, no, we're not going to take the vaccine, or we're going to wait and see, which is a wise thing to do. But this article by Dr. Wesley Muhammad, Why Black People Cannot Trust Pfizer, it goes into a history of the company. I'm not going to get into all the detail, but we need to understand, who is behind, the mind behind this vaccine that's now being widely disseminated across the country, and will ultimately, as Joe Biden said, he wants to get 100 million people vaccinated in the next several months. But in this article, Dr. Wesley Muhammad notes, and he shares with us the story of a really an experimental, wicked experiment done on some African brothers and sisters in Nigeria by Pfizer. I'm not going to go into all the details, but suffice it to say, in here it tells us about a 1996 incident, or really wicked machinations by Pfizer. But here it tells us Pfizer and this is from the Wall Street Journal, talking about Pfizer's uh, potential blockbuster drug. So it says Pfizer is sitting on a new potentially billion-dollar blockbuster drug, according to Wall Street analysis. And it was an antibiotic called Trovan, and it was not yet approved by the FDA. Pfizer had enrolled thousands of adults in Trovan clinical trials, and they wanted to debut the drug as a therapy for bacterial meningitis, but there were a number of problems. There were already effective treatments for meningitis available, as certain other antibiotics, ceftriaxone, but Pfizer's biggest problem was children. In order to gain maximum market share and achieve the predicted $1 billion a year from the drug, Pfizer needed to develop pardon me, an oral form that proved safe for pediatric use. But Trovan had never been tested on children, and in animals, it caused liver toxicity and joint damage. So it goes on to talk about not being able to get the clinical trials to people in America. So what they did, they took advantage of an epidemic outbreak of meningitis in the Muslim half of Nigeria. And they went over there under the guise of bringing some treatments to the people, but they were really bringing this experimental drug, Trovan, and trying it out on children. So it says here, between April 3rd and May 15th in 1996, Pfizer engaged in an indefensible illegal medical experiment in Kano using 200 gravely ill children as young as 3 years old who were either given an unapproved experimental drug of Trovan or inappropriate doses of an alternative ceftriaxone. Pfizer never obtained authorization from the federal government of Nigeria to conduct the experiment within its borders, and was unable to produce any documents, records that the children and their parents were informed. So they went in there under the guise of bringing volunteering. It says they volunteered. They went with the World Health Organization, and they said Pfizer volunteered to help. And they came to said vaccines and effective antibiotics were already long in use and could have tamed the epidemic, but curiously, they were not made adequately available. So rather than using the methods that they already had to help the people, the children in particular that had meningitis, bacterial meningitis, they didn't give them what they knew already was working and effective, but they came in under the guise of coming to help, and they tried out an experimental drug on it. And suffice it to say, they didn't come away with any long-term follow-up, and ultimately, children died. Paralysis came about, long-term disabilities, deafness, muteness, brain damage, loss of sight, because of not being treated properly and given this experimental drug. And I'm not going to get into the rest of the details, but basically, Brother Wesley is highlighting the underhanded, demonic way that this pharmaceutical company, Pfizer, went about trying to get a profitable antibiotic, new drug, into use to make money. Because they couldn't get the clinical trials in America, they deviously went over to Africa, as they often do, to use our brothers and sisters over there. Suffice it to say, it turned out in a negative way, and ultimately they were sued. And in 2011, Pfizer actually had to begin making payments to the victims involved in the suit as part of a $75 million settlement. In the end, an incredible, unprecedented 12,000 Nigerians died from meningitis in this curious 1996 epidemic, despite the help pledged by the World Health Organization and Pfizer. So the World Health Organization and Pfizer went in, and they didn't treat the children, they didn't treat the people with what they knew could have effectively thwarted the disease, slowed down and stopped the enormous number of deaths that occurred. Instead, they went in with a unproven trial, medication or treatment that ended up causing great death and harm to the people, and they end up paying a settlement in that case. And I'm just giving that, and he gives that in an article to help us see who we're dealing with. And they'll tell you one thing on the surface. They'll roll out people to give a good look and tell you about the sincere desire to help. But we can never trust an enemy who's never been honest and outright and forthright with us. But the thing I want to highlight, as you see on the moniker, is the relationship that Moderna and Pfizer have with a Pentagon agency. Now, Moderna is not a pharmaceutical company. They're a biotech company. Pfizer is pharmaceutical, but it's also biotech. And they partner with a biotech company to bring about this vaccine that now is being distributed here in America and all over the world. But he says this same Pfizer is now trailing a problem. Now that same Pfizer is trialing a brand new, never before seen experimental vaccine platform, the mRNA COVID-19 vaccine, and Black people are to be prioritized. See, in this grand experiment, the innovative and terrifying mRNA vaccine is the brainchild of a secretive Pentagon agency, a military technology research and development operation named the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA for short. See, as it is commonly known, it specializes in turning science fantasies into realities, but for military purposes. DARPA doesn't actually invent things itself. Instead, it outsources its scientific tasks to universities, military labs, and defense contractors such as Pfizer and Moderna. Pfizer has been an important military contractor for decades, receiving hundreds of millions of dollars to do research and development for the Pentagon, including biodefense contracts as far back as 2013. In that year, DARPA awarded Pfizer $7.7 million in contracts to innovate the type of mRNA vaccine platform that is now. So the military advanced $7.7 million in a contract to help develop this platform, the ability to program DNA through RNA messengers as a defense tool. So this platform just didn't come about in these last 8 to 9 months. It was already in the works for a military purpose. And then it says DARPA awarded Moderna a similar contract for up to $25 million in 2013 as well. Thus, behind both Pfizer's mRNA vaccine, BNT162b2, and Moderna's mRNA vaccine, mRNA 1273, is DARPA. The COVID-19 vaccine is thus a piece of military technology, and Black people are being invited to cut to the front of the line. Yeah, we should be deeply suspicious, Brother Dr. Wesley writes. And I wanted to bring that to our attention because in a few short months, and some sooner than that, because many of our people work in the medical health field. So many people right now are in line to get the vaccine. Many of us are thinking about whether we should or should not get the vaccine. So we are being faced with this choice. And, some of us may be at a loss. Some of us may not be sure what we want to do, what we would do. So it's important to get all the facts that you can, because not having facts, as we're going to talk about a little later, being ignorant to certain things can cause us great, great harm. So biotech, pharmaceutical companies outsourced by the military to develop this technology. Because when you understand the technology, it's never been used and it hasn't been studied in this form for any long period of time. And the last thing I want to say about this, there is a document that was produced for the FDA. And this is what that, last week you had I think it was Friday, maybe Thursday. Before then, you had the FDA committee, a group of people studying what the Pfizer company had presented, and that document is now available. And I have some excerpts from it, but it's what Pfizer. It's a briefing document that the committee studied, the FDA committee studied, to give the recommendation to approve the vaccine for use, emergency use. It's not a real approval, but they just basically saying, because this is an emergency, we're going to go ahead and give this emergency allowance for us to begin to take this vaccine. Now, in this document, it's 53 pages long. I read through some of it, didn't read through all of it, but there's two things I wanted to highlight in here that I did come across. First, in their evaluation of the safety of the vaccine, they have a safety monitoring plan. And the monitoring plan for the safety of the vaccine is 2 years long. Okay? 2 years is what their plan is based upon when it comes to studying the safety of it. So in other words, you really can't get the full safety of the vaccine that they say and they're trying to achieve in a 2-month study is what they put forth and gave to us, and really less than that, to say that it's safe and effective. But on their document, they're saying, look, it's a 2-year study. That's the period of time we can really study and see the effectiveness and really the safety of the vaccine. But what they gave us was a monitoring period 21 days apart between the first dose and the second dose. And they break that down into 7 days after the first dose and 7 days after the second dose, see? And then they do 1 month after the second dose, and they break down what kind of effects, what kind of ailments, what kind of side effects that they had. And then they have on here 2-year post second dose. But of course, there's no information for 6 months or 2 years after the first and second doses. So what they're saying is they're going to study the safety of it over the next 2 years. After the first 21 days, and then 7 days post the second shot, 1 month after the second dose, they want to study the effects. So up to the 1 month period, they've been able to achieve. They haven't been able to tell us what 6 months later is happening in those people that receive 2 doses of the vaccine, because we don't have time. They roll it out anyway. In this document, it talks about the 4 cases of palsy, Bell's palsy. Some of you may have seen the pictures on the internet of the people with their face. They have a muscular or like a inability to raise a part of their face. They get numbness or paralysis in a partial of their face. So they're looking at 2 years of study for their own research, but they're rushing Operation Warp Speed to get this out only after the 1 month mark of studying. All right. So I wanted to bring that to our attention. Then I wanted to show that, and many of us have heard this, they're sharing some of this information on the news, but not in the context that we should really understand. So it's saying here, they tested and gave a total of 100 adolescents, 12 to 15 years of age, enrolled in this study of phase 1, 2, and 3, but they did not put that data out. So all the data that we're receiving is not from ages 12 through 15, even though 100 children were given this vaccine at that age level, but we don't know. And there's inconclusive or unreleased data information about how that affects it. So basically young children, and I don't know where they are in the in the process of studying those children, but they don't give no information on that. So they're saying now that, you know, the ages 12 through 15 were not presented in this document. So when they gave it to the FDA and the European counterpart of the FDA, it doesn't have any information about children. All right, not the 12 to 15 age. All right. They did have adolescents 16 to 17, but that's also not in the reporting. So now you have the children that were given this, but there's no information given about how or what kind of side effects came from the children receiving this dosage. All right. and then they'll tell you about some adverse effects. But then I found later on in the document on page 42, they're summarizing things now. And, you know, it says here, suspected COVID-19 cases. Now, I want y'all to listen to this about this 95% efficacy and this safety thing that they're giving us, but they haven't been able to study as they normally do. So they'll tell you, as I heard them saying today, you know, the rush did not keep us from going through all the normal safety protocols. It just took away all the red tape and allowed us to produce as well as do the scientific studies we needed to do. So what they're saying is they didn't cut corners in their normal procedures. They just were able to do, with the help of the billions of dollars put in by the government and the red tape that was eliminated, to rush this thing to market. So as you see here, they went through their normal trials, they went through the processes, but they haven't been able to study 2 years worth of safety information because they wanted it out in 2 months. But anyway, the last thing I'll read on this, brothers and sisters, something that's in this document. This was a briefing. This is the briefing that was given to the FDA from Pfizer. It says here, among 3,410 total cases of suspected but unconfirmed COVID-19 in the overall study population. So out of the nearly 40,000 people that took and went through both doses of the vaccine, they document and gave us the numbers of the confirmed cases of COVID-19. And they give you those numbers to show the 94%, 95% efficacy of the vaccine. They gave those numbers out. But here in their summary, they're saying, look, we suspected 3,410 more cases of COVID-19, but they didn't confirm them by giving a test. I wonder why. It says out of that 3,410, 1,594 occurred in the vaccine group. So they suspected, out of the people they gave the vaccine, 1,594 had COVID. And then those who got the placebo, 1,816 suspected to have COVID. So that's almost the same amount, a few hundred off. But here, people suspected 3,400 that got COVID, which would put it almost nearly 10%, a little less than that, of the people in the study. And almost half of them got the vaccine. So that wouldn't show the efficacy that they put out there. I'm just putting this in there. It says suspected COVID-19 cases that occurred within 7 days after any vaccination were 409 in the vaccine group versus 287 in the placebo group. Now, it is possible that the imbalance in suspected COVID-19 cases occurring in the first 7 days post-vaccination represents vaccine reactionicity with symptoms that overlap with those of COVID-19. So they're saying that those symptoms may be because, the body reacts like it has COVID-19 because of the presence of those proteins that is building up antibodies against, which could be so. But these numbers, in this case, more of the people with the vaccine show and suspectedly had COVID than those that got the placebo. But it says overall, though, these data do not raise a concern that protocol specified reporting of suspected but unconfirmed COVID cases could have masked clinically significant adverse events that would not have otherwise been detected. So they're saying basically, overall, we didn't feel it was important to report this because it doesn't change, because it was no real significant adverse effects. Because a lot of people didn't get real sick and have to go in the hospital and things like that, then there wasn't no need to really report it. So that's Pfizer. That's the COVID vaccine. You do your research, you study the facts, you study the information, and study the people bringing you the information, because You know, it's one thing to study facts, but you gotta, or information, you gotta study who's presenting it, because if you can't trust the messenger, how can you trust the message? A lot of people will say, look, don't blame me, I'm just the messenger. But if you're an unrighteous person, and the Holy Quran warns us as Muslims, when an unrighteous person brings you news, look carefully into it, lest you harm a people and be sorry for what you have done. Now, our enemy, Pfizer, as we researched, as Dr. Wesley presented, could not be trusted in the case of going to Nigeria and bringing what they said was treatment, but it was a trial that caused death where it could have been avoided by thousands of people. So the old saying in the church is the devil is a liar. That's why we got to know who our enemy is. But anyway, brothers and sisters, I'm saying to you that from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, a man who has a track record as his teacher before him, spanning 90 years between the two, of presenting and giving to the Black community what is in the best interest of the Black community, and certainly not known to be liars, certainly known to be faithful warners, certainly known to be men who love their people above anything else. And I can say, as a student of 30 years, he's never steered me wrong, and I'm taking his advice, and it's not even his advice. He told us on July 4th, do not take the vaccine. But that's your choice to make. But I warn you, don't trust your enemy. Look into it carefully, and don't get in the front of the line. If you get, I'm saying don't get in line at all. But through various tactics, many of us may feel we have to get in line. But don't certainly get in the front of the line like they're encouraging for us to do. So now, brothers and sisters, and the rest of our program, you know, we wanted to present that from the final call, and we know the climate, all the energy, all the atmosphere is charged with COVID-19. And in the whole time that this pandemic has been ravaging the country and spreading across the globe, you and I have been bombarded 24/7. You know, I go home, and if I have CNN on the TV or something, they come up with a big banner, breaking news. I'm thinking something new is about to be said. No, just another update. And then they bring on this one after that one, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, this doctor, that doctor, this expert, that expert, this family that's been affected. Don't get me wrong, COVID is real. COVID is ravaging and killing our people. So I'm not saying take this lightly. I'm just saying that we need to be careful on how we move if we're moving out of the fear, the atmosphere of fear that has been produced and is charging the atmosphere. And there's no coincidence, as Dr. Ava Muhammad, who has another great article in the Final Call newspaper, last edition as well as this edition, dealing with this whole dynamic. And one of the things that you have to note is that, yes, Thanksgiving, but before Thanksgiving, we saw a surge. After Thanksgiving, a surge. Record numbers of deaths and people hospitalized right now. And it coincides right along with the unrolling or the rolling out of this vaccine. And one thing, or the thing we want to talk about for the rest of our program, is fear and ignorance. Fear and ignorance are the enemy's chief weapon that he uses to keep us and prevent us from our rising into our natural destined place in life. Now, this subject of fear and ignorance is one that's very, very important, not only as it pertains to this vaccine, but as it pertains to life in general. Because as we're going to read from a course of study that I suggest, I encourage each of us engage in, whether we're Muslim or not. You should go to finalcall.com. Let me get it lined up in the picture right, and pick up the Self-Improvement Study Course, Part 1 and 2, by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And I say this without any hesitation or reservation. This course of study will transform your life. This course of study deals with life. It deals with practical application of religious and spiritual, biblical, and Quranic principles that many of us don't grasp when we just reading the Bible, going to church, reading the Quran, going to the masjid, and we may get some good benefit from it. But the life-changing, transformative power that is in the Word of God, and I bring this up often, if Prophet Muhammad impacted the world, one man, through a word that he brought that is now in book form called the Holy Quran, and now there are billions of people under the banner of Islam because of this man. He transformed the known world after he and his followers and those after him in generations spread Islam and brought all kinds of advancement and civilization to the world, all up through Europe and other places. If Jesus, a man who walked 2,000 years ago, if Moses, a man who walked 4,000 years ago, brought impact to the world to such a degree that they're still talked about today. And I know some of you say, well, Moses didn't exist, Jesus didn't exist, this one didn't exist, that one didn't exist. And I understand, but that's not the point at this time. There are figures that prophets of yesterday. Now, some of them in their description and in what they were said to do, and this is why the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad are so valuable. Much of what you read was prophecy, not history. But that's another topic for another day. But my point is, the great worthies of yesterday, and you can go out of the scripture. You can go into the secular area, and you can go after people like Dr. King. You can go after modern luminaries, as well as recent historical figures who impacted the world as one man, one woman. My point is, many of us are lacking and are not fulfilling the greatness of our being, our potential, and really the great destiny that God had in mind when he took the time to make us uniquely as he did. You know, brothers and sisters, every one of us are unique individuals. We're one of a kind. When something is made and there's only a few limited supply of what is made, it makes it more valuable, right? So you'll have people rolling out things that say, well, it's a limited edition. You only get 100 of these made in the entire world. You only get this made in. So just think about it. One you, one me, billions and billions and billions of people on the planet, only one you. Go back in history, search as far back as you want to go. There was never another just like you. And you can go eons into the future, and there'll never be another one just like you, though you have similarities of those that are in your DNA line especially. But the reality is, all of us are uniquely made by God. Our Creator designed the uniqueness of the human being because every one of us has potential greatness that is unlike anyone else. But too many of us in this dispensation of time, we come on the planet, we live a short time, and we die, and we never manifest the unique greatness, the unique talents, skills, and gifts that we were blessed with because we have been restricted. We have been restricted by fear and ignorance. Fear and ignorance are our greatest enemies. The Bible says it like this: my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. And right after that sentence, there says, because they rejected knowledge. And fear, as we're going to read right now, it keeps you in bondage. Whatever you fear will be your master. And it will oppress you and restrict you from expressing the very desire of your heart and mind, if you allow fear to overcome you. So, brothers and sisters, we got to get rid of fear. One of the chief things they're using to make sure you line up, get the vaccine, to make sure you fall in line with all the laws, rules, and regulations that they want to implement is fear. What happened after 9/11? Right after that, they were able to pass the Patriot Act. They were able to implement very unconstitutional acts and laws that take away rights from the citizens of the U.S., but it passed right through without any opposition hardly, because the people were put in a state of fear because they watched those towers fall. They watched the towers fall on television. I was going to say you watched the plane go in the Pentagon, but you didn't see that. They just told you that happened. You didn't see the plane fall out the sky in Shanksville, I think it was, Pennsylvania. You didn't see that because there's no film of it and there's no debris to show you a plane fell out the sky. But anyway, that's, again, another topic for another day. But the reality is, brothers and sisters, one of the chief means to get across legislation, laws, and regulations that can constrict and keep the people and put them back into a very oppressive state is by using the tactic of fear. Fear and ignorance must be seen by us as individuals as great enemies to our development, to our happiness, to our fulfilling our destiny and desires in life. So whenever you find yourself being made afraid, you got to challenge fear. See, fear is a natural response. It's a natural emotion. So it's not negative to fear, but it is negative to let what you fear control you and make you a coward. So let's look at fear and some words about fear, because we want to be able to overcome fear. And there's much in the scripture that deals with fear. And this is why, being able to extract principles from what is written in these two great books in particular that many subscribe to. And, I'll say this, the real book is universe. The real book is the creation of God. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Farrakhan teach us, when man has fallen or fell to such a degree where he was no longer able to extract from the real book what would allow him to live on the level that he was designed to live on, then fallen man needed the intervention of the Supreme Being to give him laws, rules, regulations, and guidance in book form to help bring them up out of that condition. One thing you notice when you study our people, the ancient people, what they call and who they call the Aboriginal people, our brothers and sisters in what they call Africa. When you look at these old ancient tribes and the ancient civilizations that came up out of the original people, you don't find books in many of those places. You may have some writings here or there, but you don't have this these great holy books that are passed down to the people, because our people, if you study the Dongar tribe, if you study various civilizations, and even right here in America, the Native Americans, as they call them, who are original people, who are people just like us from the original people of our planet. And many of us trace our ancestry through what they call the Native Americans. But they were in harmony with the creation, didn't need a book, because they could read God's ultimate book, which is universe. But once a man in a way of life, which we talked about last week, which is not a lifestyle but a death style, comes into effect, then you need somebody to help you get up out of this lowly state. But anyway, I'm going off course. I don't want to get off course. I want to look at fear. What is fear? See, fear, if you want to define it, fear is a distressing emotion aroused by impending danger, pain, evil, etc. Look at the next sentence. Whether real or imagined, the feeling or condition of being afraid, to have a reverential awe of, as in the fear of Allah or fear of God. Fear is a distressing emotion. So when you become afraid, there's anxiety that comes. It's a distressing emotional response. And as we study, and again, I got to encourage us to get this course of study, because one of our study guides is called Rising Above Emotions into the Thinking of God. Being able to control emotional responses, understanding where they come from, where they originate in the brain. They originate in right near the brain stem, in the most primitive part of the brain, where you get these emotional responses that really control many of our lives because we haven't gained mastery over self. But anyway, fear is a distressing emotion about something that may be harmful to us. We may feel like there's danger, and this can be real or it can be imagined. But as long as my mind conceives it or perceives this threat, then I'm going to respond with this emotional response. All right. Then it goes on. The minister says, fear restricts. And then he says something very, very critical. He says, fear presupposes the absence of knowledge of what we fear. There's a saying, there's a fear of what? The unknown. And when you are able to be made afraid, oftentimes it's because there's something unknown about the circumstance. There's some unknown aspect as to what is about to happen, or there's some base knowledge and you can sense danger, or there's some open threat and you don't know how or if you're going to be able to survive this threat. So fear comes up in us. But it's very important to understand why fear has to be met and how knowledge can help us to meet fear and overcome it. Because every circumstance, every condition that we are faced with that may produce fear, we may not have full knowledge of it. We may not know the outcome of it, but it's important to know certain things about yourself and about God and even about your enemy when it comes to that kind of threat, so that you are fully aware of all the factors and circumstances that are present in whatever atmosphere of fear that is making you afraid. So, brothers and sisters, fear restricts. What does fear restrict? Fear restricts the very power of our being. Fear disallows you or causes you to not act. Look at what the minister says here. He says, look how many people live in fear today. I'm on a job and I'm afraid that I'm going to be fired, right? Right now with COVID-19, many people have been laid off. Many people don't know when their next check is coming. Many people are on unemployment and that's about to go out, and they're dragging their feet in Congress, whether to pass a bill, another stimulus bill. So many people right now are living in great fear over what their next meal is going to be, whether or not they're going to be able to pay their rent, pay their mortgage, take care of themselves, feed their families. There's a real concern, a real general fear presiding over the American people because there's uncertainty. There's what? Ignorance, or a lack of knowledge, because ignorance is just a lack of knowledge of what the outcome of these circumstances are going to be. So that brings up a natural fear, right? Pardon me. So fear is a emotion that we have to learn how to control. Look at what he says here. Think of it. So the foreman on the job, is threatening your security. You are afraid. So it restricts your will. And in a sense, it helps make the individual not just a worker on the job, but a slave to the job. Anytime we are afraid to think, to move, to express ourselves for fear of being censured or fear of losing a job, then you need to get away from that type of job. For you have lost the most precious thing that you could have, and that is free will. That is what Allah God has given you. But if your choices are made out of fear, then you have made yourself a slave. See, when you live out of fear, you're a slave to whatever you fear. When your choices are made out of fear, then you have made yourself a slave, the minister says. Because if all my life, and this is where we suffer so much in our community, because we have been placed in a circumstance and condition, not just dropped down into a circumstance or condition, but we have really been engineered as a people to produce a mindset that will create and cause us to exist in this kind of circumstance. See, if we were our original self and they dropped us into the ghettos of America, we would be like other people who choose to come into the ghettos of America, set up shop, extract money, extract wealth, be able to get strong for themselves, and then build their community and resources up, and then leave for the next person coming. But because of how we were trained to think, and really how fear, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that the enemy instilled fear in us in a very, very specific way. And that instilling of fear has been passed down generation after generation for over 400 years. And this is something that hinders us to this very day. But the fear is coupled with ignorance, because if we really had knowledge, the critical knowledge that we need, then fear would subside and we would no longer be restricted from acting on the most precious gift that God has given us, and that is free will. What makes man above every other part of God's creation is that he shared with man free will. He shared with the human being that aspect of himself that makes him God, the ability to choose, the ability to will and do as we will. See, that's God's power in the human being. But the way to control that power is to instill fear in a very, very deep-seated way, so that I can always pull on and incite in and manipulate and profit off of fear that I know is deep-seated in this man or woman that I have scientifically, socially engineered through the process of slave making and 400 years of oppressive, not just physical oppression, but the mental destruction of us as a people. Ignorance of who you are in the deepest sense of the word allows for fear to rule over us. So, brothers and sisters, we got to get rid of fear, because they'll tell you, you can't come to work, your child can't come to school, you can't fly on airplanes, you can't go in this place, can't go in that place. You know, in about a year from now, we might be totally restricted as a people based on whether or not you took this vaccine or not. See? And what fear can do, it can make you act against your own best interests. It can make you do what you really don't want to do. See? It can be used to manipulate and control you and I as human beings. See? Look at this. The minister goes on to say, that the power of our being, I'm trying to find this, pardon me. Let me go back. Because if we're dealing with this key aspect of ourselves, which is free will, and most of us, we act in a way and we feel like we're acting on our own free will. And in one aspect, yes, but in another aspect, how many of us right now have ideas, had plans, have desires to do something, but because we're afraid, it may be we're afraid of failure, we're afraid of ridicule, we're afraid that we won't be able to provide for our families, we won't be able to, if it's starting a business, if it's getting into a certain area or field of life that we desire. One thing that plagues us as a community is that because of the deep-seated fear and the ignorance of who we are by nature, we grow up in our early years with grand ideas and desires, but very early on, many times through the ignorance of our parents and others around us, we stop or give up or change what thought we had in mind, what desire we had in our heart as it pertains to what we want to do in life. And we begin to take on the very limited, restrictive avenue of life that the enemy wants us to operate in. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said this. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that we nursed the milk of fear from our mother's breast. He teaches us that in the very milk that our mothers was nursing us on, especially when we were in slavery, chemically, when our mother, now look, just study this. And we don't have to look back to slavery, but we go back there because of the graphic, real, direct understanding that we can get from it. If by nature as a man, you're not made, or a woman, to allow somebody to rule over you, mistreat you, abuse you, and subject you to forced labor with no pay. To be a slave is not a natural condition of the human being. You can't make man in his original state a slave, except that you put fear in him or her and disallow them the opportunity, even though they'll take it, whether it's there or not, to fight back against that one or ones that are trying to enslave them. But my point is, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad told us in this very specific way that we nursed the milk of fear from our mother's breast because our mothers did not want the children to be killed. They didn't want them to grow up. There was a natural or an unnatural instilled fear in her for the safety of her children, which is natural. That's natural. But what was unnatural was to make a male or a female, but in particular the man, who is the natural protector, provider of his family, to be afraid of another man, to make that man bow down and not challenge a man who is doing evil and wickedness to him and his family. Can you imagine as a man having to watch, and some of us as boys growing up in a household where our mother was abused, may have watched men beat, or a man beat on our mother, and we tried to do something but were too small. Or ultimately that one put so much fear in us that we were afraid to do anything. That dynamic on a small scale where it comes to domestic violence and abuse is what took place on a large scale of us as a people. So we were inbred, or not inbred, we were instilled with fear, not only from our open enemy, but out of the desire to protect us. As a mother is naturally a protector of her child, she's going to raise that child, in particular the male child, in a certain way so that he can or she can preserve that child's life. See? So you have the image of a black man being very submissive, very subdued, and even fearful and cowardly when you study how we've been depicted in the media, in films. So fear is something, and it was a tactic used that allowed for another man to rule over us even to this day. You got to wonder why we are so brave, so really aggressive with one another, but so docile with our oppressor and his children. So brothers and sisters, being restricted in your will. And the last part, or what we want to really focus on now in these few minutes, is gaining knowledge, the ignorance of who we are. Not only as an individual, knowing your strengths and weaknesses, but understanding who you are as a human being, understanding what position and place you hold in the creation as a man or a woman, and in particular as an original man, a black man and woman of America specifically, who you are. When you gain knowledge of self, you lose true knowledge of self. You begin to lose and have removed from you fear of anything or anyone. When you have knowledge of your enemy, when you lose the ignorance of who your enemy is, then you begin to understand that he's nobody to be fearful of. Yes, he's been allowed to have power. Yes, he has cardinal weapons. Yes, he has authority in areas of political and social construct right now, but yet and still, as a man or a woman who is a God, made in the image and likeness of the Most High God, understanding your nature as the original man and woman of the planet, understanding that this man who seems to be all powerful, who seems to be a superior being because we're raised in a world of what? White supremacy, black inferiority. And when you see it, he's dominating the planet, right? He's dominating the planet, and therefore it just seems like, well, I guess he really is. Some of us subscribe to that foolishness. But in reality, brothers and sisters, who and what we are at the very root of our being, understanding that takes away fear. Understanding our potential, understanding and tapping into the power of our being. And this is so critical, and that's what the minister said. Anytime something can stop you from acting on what God gave you, which is free will, is something that you become a slave to. So now, who are you? The Bible says it like this: who is man? That God is mindful of him, the Son of Man, that God would visit him. Why does the Quran call man Khalifa? One who takes the place of another. Why is man held in such a high position? And let me say this, the original man. See, when you understand you are the original people, that your DNA goes back to the originator himself, and that this man who is ruling the planet now is our child. He is scientifically, biologically, anthropologically, genetically a fact that he's the new man on the planet, just a little over 6,000 years old. while the original people go back eons in time, millions, more than millions, billions, more than billions of years back into time. But like the Bible said, children will rule over them. But anyway, brothers and sisters, how do we address, how do we deal with, how are we able to attack fear? The first thing we got to do is identify it as our enemy. We have to make sure we have determined in our mind that we are not going to be made to cow down and give in and submit to fear. Now, I didn't say we're not going to be made afraid. Again, that's a natural emotion that comes up. But the real thing we have to do with knowledge, understanding who we are, having faith. The Bible says that love casteth out fear. Having a true knowledge, you can't love something you really don't know. I mean, you can have an emotional feeling, but the love of self, the knowledge of self, understanding who you are, the root of you, understanding the impending danger that you're facing, understanding the time and circumstances that we are living in. The more knowledge we gain of things, the less fearful we'll be of them. Just imagine every time you face something for the first time, you always feel that anxiety. You get a little afraid, but the more you face or the more you engage or the more you indulge in whatever activity or whatever circumstance that may have caused you to be afraid, there's less and less fear every time you engage it. Why? Because you gain experience and more knowledge of the circumstance, even the person. Sometimes you meet a person, there's a, oh man, this brother or this sister is intimidating. But once you get to know that person, you're like, oh man, that brother's a good brother. This circumstance, that circumstance. So gaining knowledge of yourself and gaining a greater knowledge of your enemy, certainly you need to know your enemy. But knowing the nature of creation, understanding the laws of nature, understanding the time we're living in, and most importantly, getting to know the God. No matter what you ascribe as a name or religious affiliation with God, the God you got to get to know is the one that is in you. Because the one in you is directly linked to the one who created you and created everything that you and I know. And if that force and power, which is directly tied to your will, your free will, your ability to desire and bring into effect and reality what you desire, if you can't tap into that God power in yourself, then the God outside of yourself can do very little for you other than provide you with the creation that he's provided us with and the laws of nature that govern and give us the opportunity to do what we do. But the reality is, the old saying is, God helps those who help themselves. So you and I have to understand that having knowledge of the God of self, see, losing ignorance. This old saying that too many of us ascribe to, a nigga ain't nothing, never was nothing, never will be nothing. We call each other dog, we call each other nigga. We see ourselves as less than. See, the ignorance of who we are, what we are, and our direct connection, and really our reality of being a God. When we are ignorant to that, then we're easily controlled. So in our lessons given to us by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, as we get ready to wrap up, it talks about us fearing our enemy. And it asks the question, or it makes the statement, that our enemy put fear in us when we were a little child. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad again said that we're raised and nursed on the milk of fear from our mothers, meaning we were instilled with a mindset to be docile and submissive in order to preserve our life under very, very dangerous circumstances that in some cases, not some cases, but that did allow us to have our life physically preserved. But what it did, it killed and put enslaved, or it put in bondage and enslaved the real will and free will and power of our being. So even though we are alive physically, we were able to survive physically through that horrific Holocaust called slavery. What happened was the God of self, the expression of free will and the power of our being, was put to death darn near. And therefore, though we have made it through that sojourn, that aspect of our nature that makes us who and what we are and gives us the potential to achieve great things and establish a reality for ourselves in this world that is based on our own design, our own mind, our own will. That has been so subdued that now we just got to fit in, or get in where we fit in, as we say. We got to go along to get along. We got to ask Master to get us a job. We got to ask Master to get us a home. We got to ask, can we get in this position, like we begging now for this seat or that seat? See, you and I, having this aspect of our nature destroyed, we think we got to depend on somebody else to educate our children, to produce jobs, to produce our food, to produce homes, to produce resources for us. But man in his natural state will do for himself. Just like you study the creatures of the field, the ants, the birds, the bees, the animals in nature, they're not asking for a handout. Their nature moves them to preserve their own life, to provide for themselves, and in the case of many social creatures, provide for their young ones. See? But what happened to us? And we don't have time to go into it, but we've given deep insight by saying that we had fear instilled in us. So in that lesson that I started to quote, it says that we had fear put in us when we were little boys. But then it asks the question, why do we fear now since we are big men, grown men? And it says, because the devil taught us to eat the wrong food. And then it asks the question, does it have anything to do with that above question? See, what we eat, not only physically, but what we're feeding our mind. If we're being fed a very slave-making doctrine, like turn the other cheek, love your enemy, love those who hate you, all these things, you take your hat, give them your coat, that's a slave-making doctrine. See, the Bible in and of itself is not bad. Religion in and of itself is not bad, but the interpretation and presentation of religion is very slave-making. I don't care which one you deal with. So whatever doctrine we believe, if it doesn't have the freeing power of the knowledge of self and God to the point where you understand your direct connection, no need for an intercessor, no need for a imam, no need for a priest, no need for a minister. Not that they don't serve a purpose, but the reality is your position with God is no different than any other human being. And once you understand who you are and gain knowledge, then you can begin to express it on a level that will allow you to be a free Black man and a free Black woman. So let's not continue to allow our enemy to use fear, and let's not stay ignorant, especially to who we are, especially to who God is and who we are in relationship to God. And you got to gain knowledge of your enemy. I don't care what kind of label they want to put on the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But the reality is, this planet, the original people of this planet, have an open enemy. And his history proves he's the enemy of the darker people of the planet. And out of those that are the Caucasian people, there's a specific group, a 10%, who are the slave makers of the poor, who teach the poor lies, who teach us to believe in a mystery God, who make us to sit around and wait while they act and make a heaven on this earth for themselves. Right now, the dynamics in the Final Call newspaper, our good brother right here from Philadelphia, Michael Z. Muhammad, has an article that's dealing with the wealth disparity between the rich and the poor, going all the way back to the 70s till today, and how those that are the 10% have manifested and increased their wealth hundreds of folds over. And even in this last 9-month period with the pandemic, where wealth has exploded for the super rich, while the poor get poorer. See, these are the 10%. These are the slave makers of the poor. These are the devils. Not devils. These are the satanic beings that you and I can't really fathom. So we look at them and say, no, they just, they took advantage of capitalism. See? But you better be aware and learn who your enemy is and who you are, because when you understand that, you'll move out of a group of people who, and I'll close with this, is Brother Jabril, I see you just put it up in the comment section. I just talked about the 10%. And they really rule the 85% with fear and with a ignorance, or allowing for and really instilling in the masses of the people a real degree of ignorance through their miseducation and their teaching, that make the 85% slaves to mental death and power, people who don't understand the law of cause and effect, people who are easily led in the wrong direction but hard to lead in the right direction, poison animal eaters. So you have the masses of the people who are the subjects of the 10%. And the 10% are so wickedly wise, they control and manipulate media so much that they'll have the 85% select group defending them, when the 5%, who are the rest, who've been awakened to the knowledge, who have been awakened to the truth, who don't believe in the teachings of the 10%, who know who the true and living God is and teach that the true and living God is the Son of Man, the Black Man of Asia. When we wake up to that knowledge, then we got to fight. It's like pulling teeth, because the enemy is so skillfully, wickedly wise that he trains the 85% to be his protectors. So right now you got people that even that appear to be awake, defending and arguing with our people about taking the vaccine. If you choose to take the vaccine, that's your choice. But you got brothers and sisters who, on the front lines to argue, condemn, and attack those of us who what? Trying to express our free will. Now, anytime they come, and the minister said this July 4th, he said, if they try to force us to take this vaccine, that's an act of war. See, if you're convinced to take it, then you take it. I feel sorry for you. Maybe you'll, be fine. Maybe you won't. We don't know. Pfizer doesn't know. They haven't gotten through that 2-year study. They only did 1-2-month study. After these after the phase 3 trial, they want to study 2 years to really get the safety data, but they haven't, because what? It's only been a month. So we going off a month of data that they haven't fully released, that we get some information from. But my point is, don't let fear and ignorance be your and my downfall. Don't let fear force you to do what your heart and mind is telling you not to do. Don't fear your enemy more than you fear God, and don't fear your enemy more than you fear losing your free will. It's better to die, as they say, on your feet than live on your knees. See? Because if I can live free and begin to act in a manner where I begin to live according to my desire and will, and produce my destiny with my own hands, then even if that's a short life, it'll be a more fulfilling life than to live 100 years a slave. So let's not continue to live out of fear. Let's not continue to act out of fear. Let's learn who we are. Let's learn the power of building our will. The study guide I was reading from, the study guide number 5, called Building the Will. And building the will, well, I was reading from a lecture called The Will of God Part 1, but that's part of 4 study guides, Building the Will, because that's building the God of self. Willpower is the ability to say be and it is. Willpower is the mind's control it has over its own actions. Because how many of us make up our mind to do something, then we can't or don't do it? That means our willpower was very weak. If in my mind I say I'm going to do it, and mind or thought precedes all action, right? So I say I'm going to do it. I make up my mind to do it. And then what happens? Weakness, or the undeveloped will that's not strong enough to carry out its desire, falls victim to other influences or the weakness of our own self. So in this study course, you got to get it, brothers and sisters. Self-improvement. Go to finalcall.com. Go to the store and order yourself this study course. You'll thank me later. Because when you delve into this material, and we do it in a circle where we dialogue and discuss it, but even reading it on your own at home, you'll get so many insightful jewels, as we call them, that will give you understanding of yourself, and it gives you practical application to help you build your will, help you overcome difficulty, help you struggle with mixed feelings and controversy, help you overcome emotions, help you deal with, and develop the God within. These are all various titles of study guides that you need to get. So brothers and sisters, thank you all who have listened through the course of this program. Thank you all who have commented. I didn't get to all the comments, or many. I know Brother Jabril, you said fear, yeah, false evidence appearing real. It's something that we have to grow out of. The Bible says it like this: the fearful and the unbelieving will be cast in the lake of fire. Why did it put fear with the unbelieving? The Holy Quran says for the believer, there's no fear, there's no grief. Because when you know yourself, you know God, you know your enemy, and you understand, then fear will come up in you. But you'll face fear with faith, you'll face fear with confidence and knowledge, and you'll be able to meet and overcome the challenge of fear that's trying to make you a slave to what you fear. Don't fear your enemy. Don't fear failure. Don't fear success. What you have in your heart and mind that you really want to do, gain the knowledge of how to do it. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Be afraid of not trying. Be afraid of not fulfilling your heart's desire and dying unfulfilled. Be afraid of having that idea in your mind and seeing somebody else manifest it, and then you sitting there angry because you didn't do it. No. Don't be afraid or face your fear. Gain knowledge of what it is you fear. Once you gain knowledge of many things, you understand there ain't nothing to be feared. That's why your enemy, you need to know him. Because when you understand who you are and who your enemy is and what we are facing in life, you understand there's nothing to be afraid of. So gain knowledge. Knowledge, they say, is power. That's an absolute truth. So brothers and sisters, thank you all for tuning in. I thank Allah for the opportunity to share with you these thoughts that are on my mind, but these words from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and this truth that will set us free. Ignorance is enslaving us. Fear is enslaving us. Greed and envy and jealousy is enslaving us. Let's overcome it. Let's gain knowledge, and let's rise above emotion into the thinking of God. Let's become the powerful men and women we were born to be. And it starts with changing your mind and my mind. And let's work to change this world one mind at a time. May God continue to bless all of us. Peace. Inshallah, God willing, we'll see you next week. Assalamu alaikum.